Such a crazy story. I was home with my 3 kids after school that fall, after the Olympic trials, probably making macaroni and cheese after school for them, and the phone rang. At the time, the national cycling coach, her name was Henny Top. She was calling from the Olympic Training Center and wanted me to come and take part in a camp. I could barely even compose myself, and my kids were hollering in the background. So yes, I got to go to an invitational camp, and on the line was a chance to make the national cycling team.
The sport of triathlon, swim, bike, run. And so we'd travel around and watch him do these races. And these races, there was one person who was beating everybody. This one girl was beating all the guys, and she was winning every race, and that was Melanie Carvell. So I knew you growing up and all of your accolades, and I'm really excited that you're here with us today to talk about this odyssey that you've had in fitness and health and racing. So thank you, Melanie.
Oh, it's wonderful to be here. It's wonderful to be here, and I love hearing those stories. You know, I remember racing with your dad, and I remember him bringing you along in tow, and I remember looking at you as an athlete thinking, oh man, he's got my number, and he'll be the next person to rule.
No, not at all. That was, for me, it was like I'd do a race, like a local race or something, and a triathlon. I'd be like, hey, Melanie Carvell is here. This is a big race.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
How sweet.
But you're from North Dakota. You grew up in Mott.
Right. And Mott, little town of Mott, the spot where the girls are hot, right?
Yeah, and other rhymes as well.
Exactly. We'll stick with that one. But yes, no, I grew up in the small town of Mott, and when I was in high school, Title IX happened, which opened up the doors for women to be involved in a lot more sports, and in fact required schools to add in a lot of women's sports. So, we started playing girls basketball when I was a sophomore in high school. We had never touched a basketball before then, most of us, so a lot of those early years, those early sports that we got to try weren't very pretty.
Yeah, really fun to watch.
In fact, in my book, I talk about how my dad came to one of my girls' basketball games, and then he just couldn't do it. He couldn't come to another one because, of course, I had 3 older brothers who were great athletes. I had an older sister, too, who didn't get a chance to do much. There wasn't much available then. But, it was just too painful for him to come and watch us. He just couldn't do it. So that was it for him.
Was it encouraged for you to do the sports?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, in those small towns, because you grew up in one, too, right? In those small towns, to make things go, everybody has to kind of take part. And I signed up for everything. I just, I loved being busy. I loved learning and growing and doing. And so anything that I could do, I kind of signed up for. And then some of the things, like playing organ. And I went to a Catholic grade school, and of course, a Catholic mass every Friday. And some of those things were strongly encouraged, like playing piano and playing organ. And I'm sure I was really bad at it, but there just isn't that many people in those little towns, so everybody has to kind of chip in to make things go, to get enough people to make a team, to get enough people to publish the annual, to get enough people to do all of those types of things.
You're going to be the forward in basketball and the lead in the play.
Yes.
And you have to be. And then, you may have to throw the shot put in track and run the mile, we had a really good mile relay team that actually qualified for state, which was kind of a big deal for us. But I remember when my coach told me that I was going to have to throw the shot too, I was just like, oh my God. I didn't picture me as, somebody throwing the shot put, but he's like, get your height behind it. We need you. Let's do this. And so some of those things, you just needed to do to be able to contribute to the community. And I think, and you're a testament to that too, with everything that you've done with your life and your career and being an entrepreneur. I think there's a lot of leadership
skills that you develop when you grow up in a little town.
I think that's a good point. I think
You
you
know?
have a pretty well-rounded experience growing up because you're not
Right.
focused on one thing. You kind of have to
You kind of
try it
have
all.
to you have to try it all and chip in, and there's pros and cons to growing up in a small town, but for me, I think it really led to who I am.
Mhm. You won't be sitting on the bench anyway.
No,
You're gonna be out
right?
there.
Yeah, you're gonna need to
Whether dad's
contribute.
gonna watch or not.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
And you got into physical therapy. That's what your career was in. Did you know that growing up?
My interest in physical therapy, I always wanted to do something in medicine, and I always knew I wanted to be active and not be behind a desk. But when I was in 8th grade, I tried out for cheerleading, and the last thing, it was at St. Vincent's, the last thing we had to do in cheerleading tryouts was take a run at it and do a cartwheel in the splits. So I took a run at it. I did my cartwheel. I landed in the splits, and you could hear like the crack reverberate through the whole auditorium. And I ended up hurting myself really badly. Instead
no.
of tearing a muscle, I actually broke a piece of bone off where the hamstring inserts on your pelvis. And so, somebody asked me if I needed a ride home, and I think I was kind of in shock. And I just said, "Oh, no, I think I'm okay." The only ride I got was a ride in the ambulance to Bismarck, to St. Alexis, where I was in the hospital for about a week, and ended up on crutches for a long time, ended up in physical therapy. So this handsome PT came into my room, and it was probably day 3 or 4 because you spent a lot more time in the hospital back then, right? And I hadn't been able to get out of bed to do anything. And he got me out of bed, and he got me up on crutches. And even more importantly, he got me into the physical therapy gym with all kinds of other patients. It's kind of a fishbowl, right? And it's so good for patients to do that, because in your own room, you can feel pretty sorry for yourself with what you're going through. But you sit in a physical therapy gym and you see people that, your leg doesn't hurt nearly as bad because the person next to you is missing a leg, and the person next to them is struggling with this and that and the other. And I remember sitting in that physical therapy gym and just being so grateful that I was able to get up and move around after being stuck in bed, and then just thinking, wow, this is really a cool profession. If I can help people get back on their feet again, that's what I want to do.
You were in high school then?
Actually was an 8th grader when that accident happened. Yep. But then moving forward, that's kind of what I set my sights on. And at that time, the only physical therapy school in North Dakota was up at University of North Dakota. And it was so hard to get in, when I applied to get in after a couple years of college and getting all their prerequisites in, I think there was, 120 people applying for 24 spots. And it was, coming from a small town where we didn't have any of those advanced placement kinds of science classes. Sure. And I about killed myself trying to get in, but gratefully was accepted. And I still keep, although I'm not practicing anymore, I still keep my PT license up. And
awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you're at UND. When did endurance sports get into your life?
It's kind of a crazy, my freshman year of school, I wasn't involved, but my sophomore year, I remember walking through the field house, or maybe it was a student union, I think, and they had posters up for joining women's cross country. Like walk-ons were invited to come and join. And I'm like, well, I can run, I think I'll go give that a try.
That's your small town in you.
I think you're right. So I'm like, I think I'll go give that a try. And that summer I had lived in Bismarck and had worked as a physical therapy aide and was living with my brother down on the river, close to the Girl Scout camp, kind of down south. And I really had gotten into running, but just long, slow running, and was loving it and loving how it made me feel. And so I thought, well, that should translate pretty well to running at the collegiate level. And it was a shock. I hadn't really ever run that far or done all that
kind of speed work sort of business. And so it was a pretty steep learning curve for me. And I was the dead last slowest person on the team. In fact, in my very first cross country meetup at Grand Forks, if it wasn't dead last, it was in the last handful of women crossing the line,
Yeah.
And I was pretty discouraged. I was worried about embarrassing my teammates. I was thinking, maybe this was a bad idea. But I had a great coach, Mike Grandal. I think he's still involved up at UND in athletics in some way, shape, or form. But bit by bit, just kept working at it, and in a way, I think it was great to be a walk-on and not be a scholarship athlete. So many times we hope for our kids or we hope for ourselves that they'll get a scholarship and get a full ride someplace or at least get some help. And it ends up so many times to be so stressful, and you end up getting injured. You end up feeling like you have to run anyway because you're on scholarship, and all those things that can kind of come
your
with
passion.
Yes, you just lose the joy of it, and I talk about that in my book a little bit too. Sometimes it can be a liability to be really good at something to start with, right? And then you don't get a chance to really fall in love with it. You don't get a chance to do it for the joy. You start winning, and then of course there's always going to be that pressure, and like you said, you can lose the joy of it, right? And so in my case, I didn't have any of that pressure, and it turned out to be, and you know how it is with any kind of athletic pursuit, those people that you train with, you earn a whole different level of friendship and love, because you have conversations that you wouldn't just have at the coffee shop. You earn those conversations with your legs or with your bike or swimming or whatever it might be. And some of those friendships that I developed in college, cross country and track, they're still some of my best friends today.
Yeah.
Because you go to war together.
Yeah, you bond differently.
Yeah. You go to war together. And so for me, athletics in college was a stress relief. It was something really joyful. It was something that really allowed me to take a break from studying, because I was doing far too much studying.
Is that what kind of drew you to register? Was it out of interest, confidence, or just something to do?
To sign up?
Yeah.
My experience that summer before, I just had really fallen in love with running here in Bismarck, and down on the river bottoms, and I just wanted it. I wanted to keep going.
Cool.
I wanted to keep going with it, and I had tried some little races, and it just was something that I was really interested in.
And you coming in close to last, things like that, or worrying about embarrassing your team, and now knowing that you found a lot of success in racing, in athletics, take me through that. What happened?
Well, just bit by bit, it's one of those things where you just don't know what your potential is until you just to keep working at it. For me, I just got a little bit faster every year. By my senior year in college, I was actually able to travel with the team because I was, contributing, and one of the other turning points was I ended up training for a marathon during college as well, and so that really was a confidence builder and filled me with a drive to continue to work towards it. And it also left me with an injury. I ended up with this terrible case of Achilles tendonitis. And so the silver lining of that is I started cycling until my Achilles felt better to run again, and fell in love with that. And so there was just one more thing to learn to be able to jump on the bandwagon and try some triathlons. And so yeah, it's, and I think all through our lives, we have to pivot, right? Things are going to change, abilities, you'll be on top, and then
pretty soon you're back to being a grasshopper for one reason or another, and just being able to kind of adapt. A few years ago, I couldn't run anymore. I ended up with an ankle injury in high school. I broke my ankle in girls basketball, and I did well with it for so long. But then this past decade, I didn't do well up until the point where I couldn't even hardly walk anymore, and I had to quit running. And so we just constantly have to adapt, right? And not let what we can't do stop us from what we can do. And so, it's been a journey, but just like all journeys, yours too, I'm sure, there's ups, and there's downs, and, just not giving up and not, and of course now I'm in my 6th decade of life, right? So, so there's that, where you have to be able to cope with the losses that come with aging, and just just put your ego aside and contribute in other ways. Keep trying to learn new things and new skills, and keep going.
And if you hadn't had Achilles tendonitis training for this marathon, there's a chance then you would never have become a triathlete.
There sure is, right?
Because that you trained through by getting a bike and falling in love with it that way.
Yep, exactly.
Could have skipped a few decades there before you jumped on a bike.
Exactly.
Huh.
So it's just, I think we all have to be open, and it's hard to give up things that you love. But there's other things that you can do. And and sometimes people will say to me, "Oh God, how could you give up running?" Or, didn't you even write a book on running? And it's one of those things where, yes, it's hard, but at the same time, you have to celebrate what you can still do and how you can maybe contribute to the sport in other ways. Just like you heading up the Bismarck Triathlon, going through all that work, taking something that you loved, but then sharing it and working hard to offer it to our whole community, and I think some of my biggest joys have been helping with that Bismarck Triathlon, even though I'm not racing anymore, right? I'm gravel racing and bike racing, but even though I'm not able to do triathlon anymore, doing the Triathlon 101 workshop and helping people figure out this wonderful sport. I might not be able to compete, but gosh, we're both building other people's opportunities to compete.
For a lot of people, triathlon is the pinnacle of athleticism, or athletic achievement. So if I can just do sprint triathlon, that's the goal. It's crossing the finish line. So the Triathlon 101 that you're talking about, that's for beginners only. I mean, it's like, this is the first triathlon. It's a chance to try to experience, do a little mini triathlon with no pressure and just get a feel for it.
Right.
And that's really cool, because that's watching people build confidence in real time.
Right.
Because
it's amazing.
They're pretty nervous about going into the first one.
Right. It's amazing. And it's been so fun. How many people do we get that at that little clinic? It's a couple weeks before the race. And I think at that point, some of those people are still on the fence of whether they think they can do it. And you're there. I bring some of my other triathlon buddies who are immensely qualified to come and help us encourage these people, and then to see them finish that event. When you think about that event on race day, how those 100 people are feeling, especially the ones that did it for the first time, and how that can build our confidence, and then it just spills over into the rest of our lives.
And there's people there that they don't even know if they're going to be able to finish the race, and I don't even know if they're going to be able to finish the race. Exactly. And just being able to work through that.
Right. Kind of got our fingers crossed and hoping that it turns out for everyone. And it's that whole thing where exercising, racing, developing, good physical activity habits, it builds a lot more than muscles. Yeah. Right. And so, that's always been my goal, is to try to inspire people to do things for the right reasons, right? It's not about changing your body. In fact, if you're focusing on weight loss, if you hitch your motivation goals to that weight loss wagon, you're going to be much less likely. It's a very poor motivator. You're going to be much less likely to continue to exercise, right? But finding that deeper meaning, taking some time to take care of yourself isn't selfish, right? It's strategic. If you take a little bit better care of yourself, that's a best gift that you can give yourself, but not just yourself, everybody that you're in contact with, right? You're going to be better in your relationships. You're going to be better at your work. You're going to be better at raising your family. All of those things, it's not a selfish thing. It's a way to, it's a radical act of love that you can give for everybody that you're around.
So if someone is in that point in their life where they are committed to the purpose, I guess, or maybe they're just committed to the idea that they need to improve their lifestyle, get healthy.
You're right.
What can they do? Like, what's a good first step for someone like that who maybe doesn't know the next step to take?
Right. Well, changing habits is tough, right? There's tons of books out there that are written about how you can change habits. The current school of thought is micro steps, right? So, so many times we think we have to go big or go home. And then we all end up packing our bags and going home, So, and I also think it's really important to head into some of those lifestyle changes, thinking about it in more than a singular fashion, right? Instead of thinking, I've got to do this, I've got to hold myself accountable, setting yourself up, to maybe do something that doesn't allow for any wiggle room, that doesn't allow, we're not perfect and we won't be perfect, right? So along with setting goals, you also have to have an equal measure of self-compassion. So yes, I'm going to hold myself accountable. I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to sign up for this thing. I'm going to set myself up and hold myself accountable. But at the same time, I need to have an equal measure of self-compassion for the times where I'm going to fall off the wagon, for the times where it's not going to work out. If we beat ourselves up, we are much less likely to get back on track. But if, we can say, gosh, I'm human. Peanut butter parfaits went on sale. I had one. What's the big deal, right?
Yeah.
Or, being able to bend and flex instead of setting yourself up on such a rigid, difficult schedule that it's going to be impossible to continue.
Is having fun an important part?
Oh,
of
gosh, yes.
sticking with it?
Yeah. I mean, the number one exercise adherence tool, do you know what it is? Socialization. Number one exercise adherence tool. If you really want to stick with something, don't go it alone. It's cliche that together we're always stronger, but that's a fact, right? If you're working out with even one other person, you're going to be twice as likely to show up, right? If you're working out with just one other person, you're going to be likely to work at an exercise intensity that's 30, 40, 50, even 60% more intense than if you go it on your own. So there was a big study in Germany a couple decades ago, and the lead researcher, his last name was Kohler. So it's called the Kohler effect, right? Where being a part of something bigger than ourselves, being a part of a community, that is key for really building that strong habit, whichever type of habit you're working on trying to complete. And we really found that out how important community was during the pandemic, right? During the pandemic, CDC did a study in fall of 2021. We were running at twice the rates of anxiety, twice the rates of depression, substance abuse, suicide attempts. I mean, isolation is deadly for us, right? The most important thing that we can do is stay connected with each other, stay connected in our community. It's going to keep us healthier. It's going to keep us happier, mind, body, and spirit. So that sense of community, if you have a strong community, you're likely to have a 50% better heart health profile than if you're someone who lives in isolation. There's a ton of research out on it. So sometimes, we might want to just kind of crawl into our own hole or do things on our own, but we're always stronger if we team up.
Yeah. And so you brought started enjoying running, probably a little bit more alone on the in Bismarck, and then joined a team.
Yep.
Then trained for a marathon. Then got into cycling. How did triathlon come into it?
You know, I did my first triathlon the year I got married and started my family. And yeah, it just was so much fun. I think some of the things I loved about it you were so much less likely to get injured because you're doing 3 sports instead of 1, right? And I love running. We all love running, but, 60 to 70% of runners struggle with an injury of some magnitude at least once a year. The statistics are, it's just because of the repetitive nature, and if you don't have perfect alignment and all those kinds of things. So for me, I loved how I felt as more of a balanced athlete rather than just running. And I loved how, and I'm sure you love this too, I loved how the race isn't over till it's over. Right. I didn't come from a competitive swim background. We swam in the lake, we swam in the Mott pool, but so swimming was new to me.
Yeah, you didn't have a swim team.
No, not at all. So, but I could bike like a son of a gun. So, I had some serious catch up to do on the bike, and then so it's fun because it isn't over until it's over, and it tests you in those different ways. And the triathlon community was just such a fun place to be.
Yeah.
Too, so
is there just a flyer hanging up somewhere, and you're like, I'm gonna
it was
try
the Devil's Lake Triathlon, sponsored by Coors Light.
Yeah.
So there was like beer and hot dogs afterwards.
Sounds great. Just get to the finish line.
Yeah, it was. Back then there was a lot of beer sponsors for races. You don't see that. You don't see that as
I'm
often
still
now.
thinking of the peanut butter parfait you mentioned earlier.
Oh, that's awesome. So, and and then as I started to have children, I had, 3 kids within 5 years. I actually got faster and more competitive with having babies because, I didn't have all this time to be like, well, which way is the wind blowing? And maybe I should have a bowl of cereal before I ride my bike. Or, all of a sudden I was nursing a baby and I had like 1 hour. And so I would go out and ride my bike like a bat out of hell, so that I could. So it just, since I had less time, I trained harder, and
whatever
it was more,
the conditions are.
Yeah, and it was more special to to have that little bit of time off. And my husband was always so supportive as well. We figured out a time so every day I would have some time to myself, no matter what. And so I actually got. I mean, not immediately, because I'm not saying childbirth isn't easy or isn't, it isn't hard, but sometimes those kinds of things can help us focus more, and then we appreciate it more. And I think there's a lot of female athletes out there who find that they do get stronger.
Yeah. How did the first race go for you? The first swim, bike, run?
It was odd because the very first one that I ever did, it was swim, run, and then the bike was last.
Yeah, we didn't know how to do it here yet.
It was up in Devil's Lake.
Yeah.
And I ended up, I ended up, my husband to be also raced with me, and that was his very last race ever. And then it was the start of good things to come for me. So.
Had you done them before?
No, he hadn't done them before either.
So
but I think he was thinking,
thing.
Yeah, it was a solidarity thing. And I think he was thinking, well, if she could do it, I could do it. And between the two of us, my husband is an all around much better athlete than I ever was.
Is that right?
I mean, oh yeah, he was a fabulous athlete, So, but yeah, I mean, he hadn't strung those 3 things together, and we were both on old bikes. His might have been even older, and so yeah, he kind of crossed the finish line and laid down.
I understand. Yeah,
and I had more experience with it at the time than he did. So
sure.
Yeah. So anyway,
and you loved it.
I loved it. Yeah, I loved it from the start. I knew I had a lot to learn, but I loved it, and just kept working at it, and had a network of friends to work out with, and it just kind of went from there.
My first 10K that I ran in college in an hour, I set a PR 10 years later, and in the Mandan 10K,
Yeah.
right? In the Mandan 10K, and it was between my, I think I had 2 children at the time, and I ran a 38-minute 10K. So I ended up taking 20 minutes off my 10K time, but it took me 10 years.
Yeah.
So,
That's crazy.
and I think that's just a good analogy for life, right? It's finding something and sticking with it and kind of weathering the ups and downs, and you may be surprised.
'Cause a lot
Nobody
of
was more
people-
surprised than me, probably.
Right. A lot of
So-
people do think like my experience in high school and that athletics, that was the peak, and everything's kind of downhill from there. And you were just starting. I mean, you
Right.
just kind of started running around that time.
Right, exactly.
And
So
did you start picking up bigger races, or they were all regional, or how did that work?
yeah, it's I have to kind of scratch my head and remember the steps of it all. But there's a framework through USA Triathlon, and I know that you're familiar with them because your race is part of their series. But I just always trying to get better, and then probably the first step was finding races where I could qualify to take part in the national championships. So, those of us who are triathletes here in North Dakota needed to go to the Twin Cities. And so we would always, schedule a few races in the Twin Cities where we would have, ridiculous competition. And, if you could qualify for nationals, that was a pretty big deal. And the first time that happened to me, I think I was probably 29 years old. I went to nationals out in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And it was just a wonderful experience, and just kind of springboarded from there. And then if you do well enough at nationals, then you can qualify for world championships. And so I was so lucky throughout my triathlon career to be on 8 different world championship teams and be able to see a lot of the world, and competed in New Zealand and Montreal and Mexico and the States, and
Yeah. So are you representing Team USA
right,
in that?
right,
then?
right. And just like any sport, we have our professional triathletes, right? And we have age group triathletes. So Team USA is comprised of both of those. So I was never a professional triathlete. We often competed at the same time. So anytime there was a world championship, the professional triathletes competed on Saturday, and we would all go and try to get their autograph and watch them, because we were doing the exact same race that they were doing the next day. And so it was really fun to go and see those professionals. And then, the next day, of course, you were competing against other people in the world in your age group. So
Right.
I was on Team USA as an age group athlete.
So the first time you did the World Championship, where was that at?
In Spain.
In Spain. So
Yep, we were in Bilbao, Spain. Yep.
Did you travel with your family, or did you just go?
No, we, there's a strong network of support through Team USA.
Okay.
We had a coach. We had a process to figure out where we were all staying as a team. We had team meetings. We had support. And in order to get a more affordable experience, I chose to be paired up with another athlete who we've been lifelong friends ever since then. Since 1998, we're still lifelong friends. So yeah, it was really a great team experience.
And how old were you? Like 28? Mm-hmm. So this couldn't have been long after your first triathlon.
Right. Well, my first triathlon was at 21.
Okay. So
Yeah.
it's kind of a meteoric rise. Yeah. To go to Spain and
Yeah,
represent USA.
and I think my first trip to the to a world championship was later than in my 20s. I think I was in my 30s, maybe my mid 30s by then. Yeah.
But then it was swim, bike, run, not the other way around. You got
Exactly.
that sorted out.
Actually knew what we were doing. Yeah.
And then cycling really took off for you as well.
Yeah, it was always my strongest event. And in fact, I took a couple years off of triathlon to just focus on cycling. And so I qualified for the National Cycling Championships, and I made it to the Olympic trials and the 40K time trial.
I had to cycle less than 58 minutes for 25 miles. So it was in a race in Blaine, Minnesota, on a beautiful day on a flat, fast road. I think I ended up riding like a 58:24 and made it, and was able to go to the Olympic trials and the 40K time trial.
And is that when you went to the what was it? You were on Team USA for cycling. Am I getting that right? You went to Colorado Springs? That whole thing?
Yes. Well, what happened was so I competed in the time trial. I was unattached. You know, most of the people in the Olympic trials were on teams, right? They pulled up in their team vehicles, and I ended up taking 18th out of 124 in the 40K time trial. So later, I had no illusions that I was going to make it to the Olympics. I mean, it wasn't about that. It was about making it to the trials. Mm-hmm. And my dad was so funny at the time. He called, or we had a conversation after the race, and he said, "So you're not going to," I'm trying to remember where you're not going to Barcelona? And I'm like, "No, Dad, there's not a chance of that." And then we talk a little bit more. "So you're not going to Barcelona?" And I'm like, "No, it was never about going to Barcelona. It was about being here at the trials, right?" And so it was such a crazy story. I was home with my 3 kids after school that fall after the Olympic trials. And making macaroni and cheese after school for him, and the phone rang, and it was a woman talking with a strong brogue. Our at the time, the national cycling coach, her name was Henny Top, and I think she was maybe from Denmark originally or something, but she was calling from the Olympic Training Center and wanted me to come and take part in a camp. And I could barely even compose myself, and my kids were hollering in the background. So yes, I got to go to an invitational camp, and on the line was a chance to make the national cycling team. Time trialists are always kind of a valuable addition, because not every cyclist enjoys doing time trials, and that's what I specialized in. But so the way there's a national A team and a national B team. And one of the biggest ways that they go about choosing who's on that team is a series of national cup races. So there were 12 national cup races that year. I went that week to the Olympic Training Center. It was an absolutely wonderful experience. I was the oldest person there. I think I was 29 at the time. I was the oldest person there. My roommate was 16. She was like a pursuit champion she was a junior pursuit champion on the track. But it became very clear to me that there's no way, with a full-time job and 3 little kids at home. Of course, the more of those national cup races that you competed in that year, and the better you did in those races that you were able to get to, that's what would determine. And I just knew. I mean, that I could maybe do 1 or 2 of them that were in Colorado, but it wasn't going to be a path that I could pursue. There just wasn't any way. And that was okay. That was okay. I mean, I wouldn't trade my life for anything. I wouldn't, trade my life with my young family and my career. And very costly too. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's not like a triathlon where you can go and maybe fly in and out in a couple days and have it be something that you can afford to do. Those cycling national cup races were stage races that were sometimes a week long or even longer. And so it just wasn't in the cards for me.
Right. And you need to be supported at that point, spending that much time.
It wasn't going to happen, but it was just such an honor to be there, to be such a mediocre athlete in high school and in college, in high school and in college. Like, I never, ever would have dreamt that I'd get to go to an invitational camp. And we'd be working out there in the weight room and whatever, and these tour groups would come through, and I'd be like, oh my God, what am I doing here? Are they going to find out that I'm really not that great?
Was there that fear?
Well, you do. You're like, probably the biggest fear that I had that week was we had to do some work on the track. And I've never been in a velodrome. I've never been on a track where, you're on bikes that don't have brakes. You're on those fixed gear bikes. And Chris Carmichael, who then went on to be Lance Armstrong's main coach, Chris Carmichael from Australia, coached us on the track the day that I was there. And he was having us do such difficult, I was an absolute wreck. My roommate stayed with me afterwards, and we actually put in some extra time because it was her specialty. And I came to be more comfortable on it, but it was a stretch for me to be there.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, beyond, from Mott the spot to the velodrome at the Olympic Training Center was a big...
It's not a gravel road here.
It's not a gravel road. And now I've gone full circle because I love gravel road riding.
Did you ever, when you talked to the coach, did you ever ask why, or did they give you a reason?
Oh, it was
why?
it was the time that I posted.
That was it.
It was
Okay.
how well I did. That was why I was invited. Yeah.
That's
and
awesome.
then I don't know what other research she did, if she did other research on me or not, but
Sure.
but yeah, it was that that ability to time trial.
And when you did the national time trial, like, how was that?
The Olympic trials,
Yeah.
yes, it was a great experience. It was, they said it was a virtually flat course, but yeah, no, it wasn't virtually flat. It was pretty challenging, and I was thrilled to be there. I was prepared to. Like I said, there was 124 of us in that 40K time trial, and like even if I took last, at least I was there at the Olympic trials, and I ended up taking 18th out of 124. So. I was thrilled with that, even though I wasn't going to Barcelona. That's the year that
Is that the race that you did where you were just flying and then you looked down?
Oh, that was
Which
at
that?
Nationals. That was at
Okay.
Nationals. Yeah, it was. There's so many lessons to learn along the way, right? So. I had a great national championship out in Spokane. There was those couple years when I was focusing primarily on cycling because that was what I was best at. And I was doing the 40K time trial. And, I was just having a day. I was having like the day of my dreams. And, they seed you in those races with the fastest rider towards the last, with fastest qualifying time. So I was seated really pretty high in that race, but I was flying. I don't know how many people I passed. And yeah, just having the race of my life, 25, 26 miles an hour flying along. And then I saw a sign that there was 3K to go. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm having the race of my life. Can that be right? Is that all I have left to go? And so I made the critical mistake of like looking at my computer and kind of scrolling through a screen to get on distance so I could, and I rode right off the road, right into the ditch. I was just a mile or two from the finish line. I took my eyes off the road. I started to think about what place I was going to get and how great it was going to be to stand on that podium. I started thinking that I was hotter than I was. I started, focusing on the glory instead of the present moment. There was a lot of lessons to learn. And I got out of the ditch pretty damn quick. I dusted myself up. My front brake was rubbing on my tire. I didn't actually crash. It was more of just a slight detour into the ditch, People were talking about it afterwards. Did you see that woman in the lead go into the ditch? I'm like, oh, that was me. Lights are on, nobody is home, And so I got back on the road and I got
At this
going.
point, your brakes rubbing against your tire.
I got it taken care of, and I got into the finish. And of course, the national champion gets the Stars and Stripes jersey. And before I started, knuckleheading around with my computer, I was feeling like I might get that Stars and Stripes jersey, but I ended up taking third.
Wow.
Yeah, I ended up
That's
still
awesome.
on the podium,
Yeah.
but in third. But what a dumbbell, But it's one of those things where we know, how important it is to stay in the present moment, right? So yeah.
Some lessons are hard.
Some lessons are hard. I may have went back and, laid in the bathtub and cried for a while before I
I would have.
before I pulled myself together,
It's like, is it really just 3K to go? And
I'm in the lead. I was winning it.
Just 3K.
Yeah, it was just 3K to go after all. And so there you go.
Oh man. And then that you've had quite a career with athletics while you were a physical therapist, so you were always busy. And then recently you did this crazy idea across the country.
For sure. Yeah. What a gift. What a gift to be able to be a part of that. Kylie Harmon is a force to be reckoned with. I'm sure you know her. And she feels like a daughter to me because when she started doing triathlon, and she could be a daughter to me. So anyway, age-wise, she came to a cycling class that I was teaching at the Y. And it was Christmas time, and there was a bunch of us just slogging away, and she had been over Christmas. She'd been watching videos of RAM, which is Race Across America. Race Across America is one of the most difficult endurance events in the world. It's been around for 40 years. In fact, when we were there, RAM was celebrating its 40th anniversary. And so she comes to class and she says, and she's so exuberant. She's always the loudest and proudest person in the class. And she's like, ladies, I've been watching these videos of RAM on Netflix. There's some documentaries. Oh my God, we could do it. Like we could do it and we could do well, And we all looked at her like, are you nuts? And if you do watch some of those documentaries, they don't call it the world's toughest race lightly, right? So anyway, we just all thought she was crazy. And then here we are, like a year and a half later, doing it. But for me,
she was crazy. But
she
so
was
were
crazy.
All of you.
So were all of us, right? For me, the tipping point was the fact that we were doing it for a cause bigger than just the glory or the challenge or, Bismarck. Nowhere in North Dakota has a hospice home. All the states that surround us, most all the states in the union, do a better job of taking care of end of life than we do here in North Dakota. And Kylie is the executive director of Gaia Home, and we that was our cause, was to get the word out about starting this hospice home here in Bismarck. And so that was a turning point for me. I just thought, I've recently had lost my parents, both of them, and within a span of 6 years. And, if there was any way that I could be a part of something that would make that sacred, difficult path easier to trudge through, I was in for that. And so, 4 of us got together and we were able to be accepted by Love, Sweat, and Gears. Julie Lyons from Colorado was our coach. And every year, RAM is near and dear to her because she's done it 3 or 4 times. But every year, she coaches a team for free as long as they are doing RAM, not just for the glory, but for some nonprofit, right? So she chose our team, and that led to about a year of preparation, and we completed RAM last year. We started in Oceanside, California, and 7 days, 7 hours, and 18 minutes later, made it to Annapolis, Maryland. So it was literally sea to shining sea.
Yeah.
And it was just, it was such a privilege to do it. It was, to see the entire country, 12 states, from the, vantage point of the saddle of my bike was pretty sweet.
It's cruel to put you in Oceanside and then tell you to leave.
Yes.
Oceanside's beautiful.
It is beautiful. We started right down on the waterfront in Oceanside. And, there's the first 7 miles is a neutral rollout. And so we were on the path all along the ocean for those first 7 miles. And then we hit the mountains. Karen Gartner was our first rider, and we chose her to be the person that got us through that, the first 4 hours of the official race she started with. And it was a very difficult, not supported climbing section. And so, our coach paired us up 2 by 2. So Karen Gardner and Lori Klabundi were a team. for the whole 7 days. And then Kylie and I were a team, oldest and the
The
youngest.
next 7 days?
Well, the race itself only took us 7 days.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no problem. But the way we raced was 2 people. So Karen and Lori started out. They went for approximately 4 hours, trading off every 20 minutes. So our whole goal was it was a race. So our whole goal, I mean, we weren't out there riding for hours at a time. We were out there riding for about 20 minutes at a time on a scale of 1 to 5 at race pace, right around a 4. So Karen started out. Lori was waiting in her van. They went back and forth. Just like if you and Nolan were a team, you would ride as hard as you could for 20 minutes. You'd take off to Nolan. He'd ride as hard as he could for 20 minutes. You would leapfrog each other back and forth for about 4 hours. And then the next 2 riders, Kylie and I, would then, you'd then get to go to the RV and rest. And then we'd leapfrog each other for 4
I
hours.
gotcha. So
Yeah.
was this your team's strategy, or is this how everybody's doing it?
This was our coach's strategy.
Okay.
And at first we were balking. I'm like, 20 minutes? I don't even warm up in 20 minutes.
Yeah,
It
sure.
takes me longer than that to warm up at my age. Anyway, she knew what she was doing. And we ended up being the first place women's team that
Awesome.
year. And we were really lucky. As a riders, our only job was to ride our bike. And I would beg to differ that the other people that were supporting us had harder jobs than we did. All we had to do was ride our bike. We didn't have to maintain our bike. We didn't have to fill up our tires. We didn't have to do anything mechanical. We didn't have to cook. We didn't have to drive. We didn't have to navigate. All we got to do was ride our bikes. And we had a crew of 13 that without them, I mean,
It doesn't work.
as we started to get closer to the East Coast, the biggest challenge was the traffic. The traffic was very different in Ohio and, and some of those places than it was in Kansas, for instance, right? We could put our head down and go like crazy, but we could not let more than 2 or 3 vehicles stack up behind us because the fastest we're going is 20 miles an hour, right? And so we would have to pull over and let the traffic through.
Oh,
You
sure.
can imagine being outside of St. Louis or wherever we were, and it's rush hour traffic, and people are trying to get to work. And
Did you
there's
get a lot of middle fingers?
there were not a lot, but we did get some, and some places were more hospitable than other places.
Sure. I mean, it must look like there's something bigger going on than just someone on a...
Yes. So we had 2 vans, and the van would sometimes leapfrog in front of us during the day, but at night they were direct follow. At night they were direct follow, and it was the lights of our van that was following us in the dark that illuminated the road for us to ride on.
Had you done a lot of night riding before this?
We had practiced it.
To train for this specific event?
Yeah, our coach from Colorado came and we did a 24-hour training ride. We met up at Kylie and Justin's house. They live up in Hawk Tree, and we practiced the 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off in groups of 2 through the day, through the night, and that feeling of riding in the dark. And I think all of us were kind of worried about that. I was, because I'm older and my night vision isn't too sharp,
Did you have a headlamp?
We didn't have headlamps, but we had a light on our bike.
Okay.
But there was far better illumination from the vehicle behind us. And so, and there's times where you can get separated and plunged into darkness, right? Because you might be able to turn at a corner, but your follow van couldn't, so you had to just kind of hold up until they got close enough to you again. So, but most of us, I think, ended up during RAM itself loving the nighttime riding. I know I did. It was cooler. It was more spiritual and meditative and beautiful, and like I ended up loving the night riding.
That's awesome.
And I was, nobody was more surprised than me at that, because I was really quite nervous about it.
I would be.
Yeah, but it was just beautiful. Fireflies,
Oh, cool.
armadillos, it was just yeah.
What was the daily experience like for you? I mean, you'd have the 20 minutes on, and then what happens?
So we were 20 minutes on, 20 minutes off for 4 hours. and then we would get to go to the RV and take a little bit of break. There was food ready for us. Carol Beiswanger took care of all that. We chipped in and did a lot of cooking before the race in the months leading up to it. So we were warming up a lot of things in the freezer or whatever. But so we'd come back, we'd get into the RV, we'd take like a little bird bath of some sort, change our clothes and get something to eat and then lie down and try to get some rest.
Were you excited about this? Because I mean, it seems like a pretty cool full circle thing. You've had a really long cycling career that you've done really well in, and there's this, now you get to do this huge event where you're doing really well. I mean, were you thinking about that during, or?
There were a lot of nerves and there were a lot of worries. Age is just a number, right? But there are some, so being the oldest person on the team, I had some concerns about like, am I going to slow the team down? Am I going to, but we all, once we got going, everybody just did their best. And it ended up to just be, once the gun went off, a lot of those insecurities and worries, it's getting up to the starting line. That is a real journey, right? For any athlete, right? It's all those little steps along the way to the starting line, maybe workouts that didn't go as well, maybe insecurities, whatever it might be. But once you get to that starting line and you go, all of that kind of fades away. And it was, it was just a remarkable experience, and great teammates and a great crew. Without them, it wouldn't have happened. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So in all of your prep and your planning for your 4-hour sessions, are you able to look at 4-hour sections of America and see how hard or how easy your portions are going to be compared to others?
Right. That's a great question. So yes, there was our crew chief was Mike Gartner, one of our riders, Karen Gartner, her husband, and we had this crew of 13 people, right? But so there was a couple Bibles, very large documents that would explain every route, every day, every hour in detail. So I'm not one so much to, like sometimes that stuff makes me nervous. So I'm not one to like look at that because then I maybe stew and fret. So, so that wasn't really, I just was like, well, got to do it regardless.
So did you ask them, hey, don't let me know if I have a lot of hills?
No,
Just
it's not that I
tell me
didn't
when I'm
want to
popping
know.
on.
And some of it you did need to know about. So it was kind of the luck of the draw. Kylie and I ended up with some of the toughest climbs. So we had Wolf Creek Pass, and there's so much hubbub that goes around that section of the ride because it is the highest altitude, Wolf Creek Pass in Colorado. And so everybody's talking about it. Like, who's your rider that's going to do the last section and it ended up to be me that did the last section up. And so it was, and then Kylie, God bless her. I got up to the top. We got up to the top at about 11:30 in the middle of the night. And then she had the downhill at 40 miles an hour on her bike, 40 miles an hour on her bike in the dark. Yep.
Oh boy.
And it was cold,
Did you expect that with planning that could be at night? Or,
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We knew that we were just, like calculating it out. So it was a real confidence builder to cross that one off the list. We had 2 more passes the next morning. So, not a lot of time. So we ended up doing three mountain passes within 12 hours.
Did you have radios at all? Or were you communicating?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. There were 2 radio channels. One channel was for crew only, and the other channel was for crew and riders. So if they had to say something about us that they didn't want us to hear, so both the vans and the RV, and then we had the riders that were out riding had, a microphone so we could communicate and they could communicate with us. So if they wanted to, if maybe my crew noticed I was really struggling, they might say, Melanie looks like crap out there right now. Let's get her off the course, And if I would have heard that, I probably would have started crying.
Wrong channel.
Still here.
Well, and then there was one point, it was kind of funny, but I was cheering somebody on about something. I can't remember, or telling one of my teammates they looked beautiful or strong or whatever, and I can't remember. And they didn't know. They did get that wrong, and I heard it, and it was I think it was Mike and his brother. Oh, it's probably Melanie saying something motivational and inspirational. So they had some fun at my expense, but yeah, it's probably Melanie doing something motivational and
They're getting sick of your optimism.
Yes. And I'm like, hey, I'm here.
Yeah.
No.
Because they're on no sleep. Oh, that's great. What an adventure.
Yeah.
What was it like what was the finish like?
We finished, we were predicted to finish at about 4:30 that afternoon. But I'm here to tell you that last day was not like the last day at the Tour de France where everybody just ceremonially rides and drinks champagne. The last day was so hard. And if I would have, like you were saying, Nolan, if I would have looked at the preview, maybe I wouldn't have been so shocked. But part of it is you're so tired. It was day 7. We're so tired, but we were going through, that last stretch, the Appalachians. So it wasn't like Colorado where we were up at 13,000 feet or 12,000 feet, but it was up, down. The amount of vertical climbing was ridiculous. So even though it wasn't at altitude, it was just, the last day was really, really hard for us. So we were predicted to finish at 4:30, then it was 6:30, then it was 8:30, then it took us a lot longer to get to the finish line than we expected. Then there's an official line. There's an official finish line, and I think we crossed that at like 11 p.m., but there's still 10 more miles to go. That's ceremonial. And I remember thinking, I don't even need to go to the finish line. I was so done, right? And of course, I'm so glad that we did, because the finish line was amazing.
Because it's the last 10 miles.
Yes, and we had to go by the state capitol and wind through the downtown, and we ended up on the riverfront, not the riverfront, the ocean front, in Annapolis, and there was a lot of partying going on because there's a lot of open air bars and restaurants on that Annapolis waterfront, and we had a lot of people cheering for us. They were like, "Hey, come over here and talk to us," and we were like, "You don't really want to have anything to do with us. We haven't washed our hair in a week."
Yeah.
We're so no, the finish line was really, really special. Yeah.
That's really cool. And you wrote a book a while ago.
Yeah, it's been a while. 2014 it came out.
Yeah, Running with the Antelope. What?
Yeah.
Can you tell me about the title?
You might have to read the book, but no.
It's a good book. Yeah. It's worth reading.
Thank you. There was a few different purposes with the book. I wanted it to be, my parents were getting older at the time, and I wanted to get some of those family stories written down. And I thought, even if I can't get it published or it doesn't get published, at least I'll have those family stories of those tough Germans and those tough Germans from Russia that came to this godforsaken place, to try to homestead and make a go of it on this tough, unforgiving prairie. And so I wanted to get those stories down. And at the time I was doing a lot of public speaking too. And whenever I would, speak at a conference, people were like, gosh, I'd love to learn more. I'd love to, do you have a website? Do you have any information? And so writing a book became a way to kind of share with people that I spoke to. And I also wanted to, have it be a North Dakota book, and to have it be a book about physical activity that doesn't just focus on results, that focuses on the journey, and that focuses on all those things that are so much more important than just results, right? Those relationships that you can make, and all those other benefits of being active and investing in community. And so I was trying to weave several different things together, and the result was was running with the antelope. And the title comes from, we have a lake place out at Lake Chida. We're trailer trash out there. But I grew up out there. My husband grew up out there. My kids, still adore going out there. And, there's gravel roads that surround our trailer out there. And one summer when I was running, there was a herd of antelope that were hanging out close by to the roads that I ran on every weekend. And they were so inquisitive and so fun. And I swear sometimes they were running with me. And so just one of the beautiful things that can happen when you're open to getting out there in this place we call home.
Yeah. And what is it about you, Melanie, that you've done all of these incredible things, and is it that you have this innate optimism in you? Is it this curiosity, or is it just competition? Like, you say yes to a lot of really incredible, crazy things. From even joining cross country when you didn't have that experience. What is that?
I think sometimes we think if we do more, we have more, we are more, we'll be happier. But for me, it's always been like doing something of value and meaning for someone else. That's really made me happy. And so, just like with RAM, the tipping point for me was, if this can leave our community better than we found it, I'm going to do it. And so I think a lot of times people look at things I've accomplished and thought that for me, it's all about winning and competing and races. And it's never been about the races for me. It's always been about building relationships and building community and making our community a better place. And probably more so now as I'm in my 6th decade, it's like, what can I leave behind? I think we all feel that way in our bones where, we start to think, and the older I get, of course, the more introspective we get, and the closer I feel the ties to my community and to North Dakota. The more I appreciate North Dakota and the beauty of it. I'm certainly not winning races anymore, but it's more the vibe of just being there. Last weekend, I did the gravel race out at Huff Hills that 701 Cycle and Sport put on. And oh my goodness, it's so beautiful out there, right? So just being out on those gravel roads, it feels like home. And even though I didn't make the podium, right? I was one spot off, dang it. So I'm a little competitive maybe, but just being out there and hopefully inspiring other people and just enjoying this place we live in, right? And the beauty of it.
Oh, you're a giant in our community, so thank you for doing that, and thanks for the conversation.
Oh, it was so fun. Yeah, it was so fun. Really fun to visit with both of you, and I'm grateful for the chance. So thank you. Thank you too.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. I'm Brian Jackson with Mighty Missouri Coffee. With me is Nolan Johnson with Quantum Digital. So if you like how this sounds and looks, thanks to Quantum Digital, if you like the way that this smells and tastes, that's thanks to Mighty Missouri Coffee. Coffee to your door, mightymissouri.com.